Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared on last weekend Friday, the 14th of March, that South Africa's ambassador to the US, Ebrahim Rasool, was no longer welcome in the US, accusing him of being a race-baiting politician who hates America. What happened? How did we get to this point? But most importantly, how does this affect relationship between South Africa and the US? Well, Kgotso is going to break this down for us this afternoon. Kgotso, good afternoon to you. Thank you for taking the time and joining me this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Cliff. Once again, it's with you. It's a pleasure to speak to your audience. Thank you so much for this honor and privilege.
Thank you so much, man. So let's get into this conversation. I mean, let's start at the beginning. First things first, what on earth happened that the SA ambassador to the US got expelled from the country? I mean, run me through how we got to this point and what happened come last week and Friday.
Yes, so former Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool was invited to a webinar from the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, so that's MISTRA. And the topic of discussion was the implications of the changes in the administration for South Africa and Africa. And there were some comments that were made that were not accepted or that were not welcomed or by the Trump administration. Ambassador Rasool had discussed the changing demographics within the United States, stating that the white majority would become a minority, that the white population in the United States would go down to about 48%, and essentially saying that the United States would be a majority minority country, and essentially saying that also that Donald Trump is a response to this and is promulgating or promoting a white supremacist agenda within the United States to sort of restore the white majority in the country. And these comments were not welcomed, and that hence why Secretary Marco Rubio called Ambassador Rasool a politician. But I think this is another moment that is ratcheting up tension between the United States and South Africa over the last couple of months. Ebrahim Rasool was an ambassador at one point. He was an ambassador to the United States between 2010 and 2015. But President Ramaphosa reinstated him as an ambassador at the beginning of this year, and his credentials were accepted by the outgoing administration, President Biden, early in January.
Okay.
But yes, so that's basically the situation as it stands right now. But as for what the next steps are from President Ramaphosa, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you've also seen is that, like President Donald Trump, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is not playing around. I mean, this guy is very, very serious when it comes to, defending the U.S. on whatever that defense look like. We've seen it with a number of things. Just the way he even was outspoken when Ukraine president joined the White House as well in that meeting that we've all seen. We've also seen his body language when it comes to that conversation as well. So one thing that we've also picked up is that he doesn't play around when it comes to the US. But now, just in terms of relations between South Africa and the US, what does this mean? And then most importantly, how much do we actually need this relationship between the US and South Africa?
No, that's an excellent question. And I think just before I answer that, I think it's important to note diplomats are allowed to, in certain respects, voice their opinions over the administration at which they are being hosted in, or the country that they're being hosted in. However, this was on a very much public forum. And usually these type of comments should be reserved for closed door meetings. And so what was stated by Ambassador Rasool was wholly undiplomatic, because it was and it was hyper criticizing the current administration in the United States. But I think it just in terms of the relationship between South Africa and the United States, I've seen commentary from certain politicians and also some South Africans, ordinary South Africans on social media platforms,
Mm.
um, um, essentially rubbishing the relationship we have in the United States, saying that we do not need America or that America needs us then we need them. And I think it's important for all parties involved, particularly on the South African side, to make their opinions grounded on reality.
Okay.
We have a country that is that has about a third of the working age population unemployed. We have about 28 million people on social grants.
Mm-hmm.
We have we cannot afford to lose any further jobs in this economy. And of course, AGOA, which is something that we've mentioned and we've discussed extensively since last year, supports approximately 100,000 jobs in this country. And the number of people who depend on those jobs, that I don't have that figure, but I'm sure obviously it's significantly larger than 100,000 people.
Yeah.
So we are already at a tense moment in our country, and I dare not to be alarmist, but it is important for us to take cognizance of that,
Mm.
to know that we are in a vulnerable position as an economy, as a society, and that the United States contributes significantly to our economy through investment, through multinational corporations that we engage with on a daily basis. I think it's important for cooler heads to prevail. I think it's important that political grandstanding is not something that we continue to tolerate,
Yeah.
and that we get to a point where we can have a serious conversation with the Trump administration, rather than rather than criticizing them extensively on a diplomatic level. I think on a domestic level, politicians are free to state whatever they want to say, but I think at a diplomatic level, it's paramount
Yeah.
that cooler heads prevail on that front.
Well, speaking about having this conversation, especially on an international level, at the when we had the 4 o'clock bulletin, I shared a piece of information that said that President Cyril Ramaphosa says government will send a new envoy to Washington following the expulsion of Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And in response, this is also what the president had mentioned.
Ebrahim Rasool
Mm,
will be coming
mm,
back soon. Improving our relationship with the United States of America is a priority for us. They are our trading partner, second largest trading partner after China.
So with that said, there as well, Kgotso, look, I mean, I know we're about to send someone else now over to go ahead and kind of mend relations with the US, but don't you think that at some point that the president himself should, rather step in and have this conversation with the US if he values the US this much, being a close trading partner, as he said in his own words, instead of sending
mm.
someone else over to go and try and mend the relationship that he hopes to keep with the US.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the president does need to schedule a trip to the United States, but I don't think that that is an idea that they haven't considered or that they haven't mulled over. I think the issue is whether they are in the first place getting any response from the Trump administration. And I think that's probably what they're trying to figure out and how to at first actually receive or get some form of contact with anybody in Washington
Mm,
to facilitate that meeting. Now we already know that AfriForum and the Democratic Alliance in its private capacity, not as a member of the GNU,
mm,
has received an audience from the Trump administration and also from members of Congress. And I think then what most likely the Trump administration is looking for is whether there's any signal from the Ramaphosa administration to concede in certain aspects, or to whether there's any form of change in policy, or desire to discuss that policy, and maybe openness to any amendments on that front. And I think once that happens, they might be able to receive an audience. But we will see. There is still the G20 taking place in November. We'll see whether President Trump will be attending. I don't think that is likely for a juncture, but I mean, we still have quite some time until November, so a lot can change. Yes.
Well, I mean, speaking about the change, rightfully so. It's only in November taking place. We've also seen in the last couple of days how the President Donald Trump has changed quite a bit. One moment he's putting these tariffs and sanctions on places like Canada. Next moment he switches it up completely. You never know what is truly going to be happening. So let's wait and see what happens in November. But also let's keep our eyes on this and see what happens between the US and South Africa in the coming days and possibly weeks and even months, especially with the new delegate and ambassador being sent over to the US. But for now, Kgotso, thank you so much for your time. It was a delight and a pleasure chatting to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cliff. Until next time.
Thank you so much. That was Kgotso chatting to us about what has happened, kind of breaking open the conversation between the US and South Africa, especially with the no longer welcome message coming from US Secretary of State Marco Rubio to Ebrahim Rasool. The politicians within South Africa, especially the EFF, has quite a bit to say about the new ambassador possibly being sent over to the United States as well. I've got some more great music coming up, taking you all the way till about 5 o'clock. But before I do any of that, let me give you some of this.
Galasiërs 6:5